Many of my clients ask me to help them understand a little bit more about crowdfunding. And while I have a free course that you can take on Steve Biz Academy or a primer that you can get on SteveBizBlog, I want to talk a little bit today about the basic categories that crowdfunding falls under. Initially, there was crowdfunding for creatives. Now, you might have wanted to write a book. You might have wanted to go ahead and make a movie or something along that line. And if what you were looking for was people to help fund that particular passion project, I will say. And a lot of people will share those passions. And so maybe they don't have the skills to go ahead and develop a book that talks about maybe dyslexia, but it's something that's important to you. So consequently, you might want to fund that creative effort to go do that. Now, honestly, there has been other ones that fall into that creative realm as well, and a lot of them might have to do with personal needs type of a thing. Maybe somebody has passed away and you're needing money for funeral arrangements, or maybe somebody had some surgery and you're looking to raise capital to effectively pay for some of your medical bills. And we've all seen those kinds of crowdfunding campaigns out there to try to raise money. Now, they don't give away any equity or anything like that, but they do provide some money to the individual if they do in fact have a successful campaign. But what happened was in the 2007-2008 timeframe, when we had that meltdown of the economy, the government began to look at what separates the people who are haves from the people who are have-nots. And so one of the things that they discovered was that people who were able to invest in early stage businesses typically were the haves, and those types of investments were not available to many of the people because, quite frankly, the Securities and Exchange Commission dictated that in order to be an investor in those particular businesses, you had to have a prior relationship with them, and in most cases you had to be what they call an accredited investor, which essentially meant that you had roughly $250,000 in income or about $1 million in unencumbered assets that you had. And they figured if you had that you were, financially responsible enough to go for yourself. But if you didn't have that, technically you were not able to participate in many of these deals. So from a crowdfunding perspective, what they did is they created the Jobs Bill, which opened up several different functions in there. And one of it specifically was the ability to create a crowdfunding campaign where you could do a general solicitation to individuals who are not accredited investors, okay? And that's what we call the equity type of a crowdfunding. So essentially, you can make an investment in a startup or some business and exchange equity for that, and maybe as small as a $20 investment, which is which is normally a larger company would never take something so small as that. And so now you could, diversify a portfolio and invest in several different startups or several different ideas that you had for relatively low amounts of money. And when those companies got bigger and they started to pay dividends or distributions or even went public, for example, you would own a small fraction of that company, and they figured that would kind of help. Unfortunately, quite frankly, that form of crowdfunding did not necessarily take off as well as the government had really kind of hoped it would. Many security and exchange types of lawyers said, if you're going to go for a second round of financing, for example, you probably don't want to go ahead and do your first round as some kind of an equity-based crowdfunding because you're going to have a lot of very small investors, and you'd rather separate that and really have only a few very large investors instead. But what really took off during this whole thing is what we call reward-based crowdfunding. And reward-based crowdfunding essentially might involve, let's say I have a product, I plan to retail it for $400, but I put on my crowdfunding campaign, if you're willing to support me in my early stages and donate $300, not donate, but invest $300 today, which I then can use perhaps to go out and get tooling or do something appropriate with that money, then I will go ahead and I will sell that to you for the $300 and not the $400. So it gives those early adopters the ability to get in very early and get a product for less than what they anticipate the retail amount for. Now, what it also involves is it doesn't have to be access to your product or services. Sometimes it might just be a $5 donation would give you a high five next time I saw you out in public, or maybe a $25 contribution might get a signed copy of our patent paperwork that you could post in your office or something like that. There's a variety of different things that people could actually go ahead and offer for rewards to support that. Because what ended up happening was that people who were supporting those campaigns, quite frankly, were actually living vicariously through those people. And what they really wanted to be able to say when those companies became big and successful is says, I was there in the very beginning. So when it comes down to funding a business, think about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is definitely a viable way to go ahead and fund a new business. Be sure to check out SteveBizBlog for more handy information on how to start and run a business.